Dear students, in this class we shall discuss about determinants of demand. In the previous class we discussed about what is demand, law of demand, types of demand. So this demand being a major factor in economics which influences on the economical principles and practices. So we have to know about this. So in today's class we shall discuss about determinants of demand. The first determinant being price of the product. The price of the product as a major determinant under demand influences greatly on the economical functioning. So that is, any changes in the price of a product will have an impact on the demand of the same. So that is, suppose if the demand increases, price also increases, or price increases, sometimes demand may decrease. So how it changes, so that we will be studying by applying the economical principles and formulas, and that we will be discussing in this unit. To know about that, or to discuss more about that, we have to know the price as a major determinant of demand. And the second important determinant is income. So income of a consumer or income of a customer also influences, because so that income, based on the income, the consumer prefers to buy a product, and the price of that looking at the price of that product also will have an impact on that. So this price and the preference will have a direct impact on the income of a consumer. The third one is price of the related goods. Then the price of a product, the price of the related goods also influences on the demand. Suppose if the price of the related good decreases, then the demand for a particular product may come down, because the consumers prefer to buy the related good based on its price compared to the good they were purchasing. And the fourth one is tastes and preferences. Then advertising, consumers expectations of future income and price, then population growth of economy, and consumer credit. So these are the few determinants. So each determinant we will be discussing in detail. So like price, income, and the taste and preferences, the advertising, the promotional activities of a product or a company also influences the consumer in buying a product, and vice versa. So that is, the promotional activities may influence greatly on the purchase capacity of the consumer and consumers expectation of future income and price. So looking at that also, the consumers may like to invest on the particular product or commodity or service, whatever it is, expecting greater revenue in future or greater profit in future. And population growth of the economy, so this also will have an influence. So where the type of people and the number of people living in particular economy also decides the business or the product or the production function of company. And consumer credit, to what extent a consumer can buy, purchase, or lend. So that also decides the demand. So these are the determinants of demand. Now let us understand the demand function. When the relation between demand and its determinants are expressed mathematically, it is inferred to as demand function. So because just now we discussed about determinants of demand, so to know the relationship of each of the factor or the determinant, we have to analyze that and we have to represent that mathematically or in the form of a formula. So that kind of representation we call as function. So that we infer with respect to demand, it is called as demand function. Demand for a product that we express as dx or x is a function of I, that is price of the commodity, as x. No, if we take I as price of the commodity, that we call as we represent as px. And the income of the consumer, all the determinants we will be considering here, that is represented as y. And price of related or substitutes of complements or commodities as po. Tastes and preferences of the consumer as t. Advertising as a. Future expectations as ef. Economic growth as n, that we represent as dx is equal to function of px, y, po, t, a, ef and n. So if we write that, express that, so that can be written as demand function can also be expressed in the equation form as dx is equal to a plus b 1p plus 2b 2y plus b 3po plus b 4t plus b 5a, where a is a constant and b 1 2 3 4 and 5 are the coefficients of each of the determinants of the demand. So all 5 or 6 determinants we will be considering. So this is the mathematical representation of a demand function. Now based on this law of demand has been proposed, that is to know about that. So now let us try to understand what is law of demand. Recognizing the fact that price of the product is the single most important variable of a product's demand, the law of demand has been proposed. It states that the other things remaining constant, that we call as ceteris paribus, when the price of a commodity rises, the demand for a product falls, and the price of a commodity falls, the demand for the commodity rises. Demand for a product is inversely proportional to its price, that is dx is equal to function of px. A linear demand function can be expressed as dx is equal to a minus b px, where a is constant and b should be greater, assuming that b should be greater than 0. So by keeping all these constant, the law of demand is expressed. So that is by keeping all these determinants constant and by considering only the price factor, price of a commodity, it states that if the price of a commodity falls, the demand for the commodity rises and vice versa, as simple as that. In this linear demand function, the intercept a, that is called a constant, represents the level of demand when price is 0, and the slope b, another constant, measures the change in demand per unit, that is change in price. So here you are seeing that the law of demand, how it works. So you can understand easily. That is the law of demand affirms the inverse relationship between price and demand, assuming all the determinants of demand except price remain unchanged. So when the price increases, the demand for that decreases. So that could be measured in terms of quantity. Then demand curve plots a exact quantity that will be purchased at any given price on a chart. So like this, the determinants of the level of demand or prices or of related goods or services, income, tastes and preferences and other exceptions. So this is called as law of demand. And here we have to consider few exceptions also, and at the same time some assumptions also, like the assumptions like income level should remain constant, tastes of the buyer should not alter, and prices of other goods should remain constant, no new substitutes for the commodity, price rise in future should not be expected, and advertising expenditure should remain the same. And the exceptions like apprehensions about future prices, status goods and given goods. So at this condition only the law of demand holds. Now let us understand the reasons behind law of demand, that is the reasons like price effect, then substitution effect, income effect, law of diminishing marginal utility. So we will be discussing all these one by one. Now let us understand the demand schedule and demand curve. What is the difference between demand schedule and demand curve? A list of tabular statement of the different combinations of price and quantity demanded of a commodity is known as the demand schedule of the commodity. Whenever we plot this in the form of a tabular representation, that is called as demand schedule, and the same is represented in the form of a graph, it is called as demand curve. So such demand schedule and demand curve we can plot for a product, for a sector, for a commodity, or for an industry, for a market. So demand curve for a firm is achieved by the horizontal summation of individual demand curves and that of the industry by adding the demand curves of all the firms. And now and shift in demand curve is, as I said, it is the graphical representation of the tabular form. Now let us understand the exceptions to the law of demand. So here the exceptions like given goods, snob appeal, demonstration effect, future expectations of prices, insignificant proportion of income spent, goods with no substitutes. So these are considered as exceptions, like the products which has the status quo, that is usually purchased for the status representation are considered as exceptions, and the essential goods like salt, rice are called as given goods. So because they are essentials, we cannot consider that for law under law of demand. And demonstration effect based on the promotional activities, how it is been shown or represented, no, so that will have some appealing effect on the buying capacity, buying behavior of the consumers. So that is also an exception. And future expectations, any investment made on future by considering the future income or expectations, also considered as an exception. And insignificant proportion of income spent also is an exception to the law of demand. So the same has been expressed here, represented here. This is about law of demand. Now let us discuss the second determinant, that is supply. Just like demand indicates the willingness of purchaser to buy a particular commodity, supply means a willingness of a firm to sell a particular commodity. Supply indicates the quantities of a good or service that the seller is willing and able to provide at a price at a given point of time, other things remaining the same. So this is called as supply. And here the determinants of supply are price of the commodity, cost of production, state of technology, number of firms, and government policies. And as like the demand function, supply function also can be represented as when the relationship between supply and its determinants are expressed mathematically, it refers to as supply function. Supply of a product is a function of price of the product, cost of production, that is the various factors like wages, interest, rent, prices of raw materials will be taken into account. Then state of technology as T, government policies regarding taxes and subsidies as G, and other factors like number of firms as N. So by considering all this, the supply function is represented as mathematically as Sx is equal to function of Px, C, T, G and N. So the supply function of a commodity represents the quantity of a commodity that would be supplied at a price, levels of technology, input prices and all other factors that influence supply. Firm's supply function Sx for a good X can be simplified by holding constant the values of all variables other than the price of the good as follows, that is n S is equal to f of Px. And a linear supply function can be written in the form of Qs, that is quantity supplied, is equal to C plus dP, where C is constant and the D should be greater than 0. Here C and D are constants. The intercept C represents the quantity supplied when price is 0. The slope D measures the positive change in quantity supplied per unit increase in price. So after understanding this, let us understand the law of supply. The law of supply states that the other things remaining the same, the higher the price of commodity, the greater is quantity supplied. That is, price of the product is revenue to the supplier. Therefore, higher price means greater revenue to the supplier, and hence greater is the incentive to supply. At the same time, higher profits also attract new firms to market. Say for example, if we take commodity soap, no, so in the market we try to balance the demand for the soap, a particular soap, to that is through its supply. The equal quantity demanded to the equal quantity need to be supplied. So if we arrive at that state, it is called as equilibrium. And now let us understand what is supply schedule and supply curve. As like demand schedule and demand curve, whenever any supply the quantity, it is represented in tabular form, it is called as supply schedule, and the same table when it is converted in the form of graph, a graphical representation, it is called as supply curve. And shift in supply curve is change in quantity supplied refers to the movements along the same supply curve due to change in price of the commodity. However, when change in supply is associated with change in factors like cost of production, technology, etc., it causes a shift of supply curve upward or downward. So that is called as shift in supply curve. So due to changes in demand and changes in price, so that affects on the supply. So this is about supply, law of supply, supply schedule and supply curve. Now let us understand another important concept, that is market equilibrium. Taking the market demand curve and market supply curve, we try to strike the equilibrium price where the players, the competitors or the buyers, that is the consumers on one hand and the producers on the other hand, are satisfied. Market equilibrium implies that there is neither excess demand nor excess supply. Equilibrium in the market occurs when that price is reached where demand for and supply of a commodity are equal to each other. So this is called as market equilibrium. So these are the various important concepts that we need to study in demand function. today we understood the law of demand, demand function, determinants of demand, then demand function and demand curve, and supply, determinants of supply, law of supply, and supply function and supply curve, and market equilibrium. In the next class, we shall try to understand how to measure the demand that we do in terms of elasticity, and what is elasticity of demand, then uses of that, demand forecasting, and measurement of elasticity of demand, then a few again problems related to price elasticity of demand and forecasting demand forecasting techniques. Thank you.